They put me in a home and forgot me. So I took their inheritance. My name is Dorothy, and I'm 83 years old. Most people would look at me and see just another elderly woman, maybe feel a little sorry for me, sitting here in this nursing home. But what they don't know is that I'm about to tell you the most satisfying story of revenge you'll ever hear. And it all started with a phone call that changed everything. You see, for 60 years, I thought I was living the American dream. I had 3 children, Michael, Sarah, and Jennifer, and I devoted my entire life to them. I worked 2 jobs to put them through college, sacrificed vacations to pay for their weddings, and when my husband passed away 15 years ago, I used his life insurance money to help them buy their first homes. I was the grandmother who never missed a birthday party, the mother who dropped everything when they needed me. But here's the thing about giving everything you have to your children. Sometimes they start to expect it, and eventually, they start to resent you for it. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything fell apart. I was making my usual breakfast of oatmeal and coffee when the phone rang. It was Michael, my oldest, and his voice had that cold, businesslike tone that I'd been hearing more and more lately. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. No greeting, no asking how I was feeling. "Sarah, Jennifer, and I have been discussing your situation, and we think it's time you moved into a care facility." I nearly dropped my coffee mug. A care facility? Michael, I'm perfectly fine living in my own home. I've been managing just fine since your father died. Mom, you're 83. You fell last month, remember? What if something serious happens and nobody's around to help you? That fall, I'd slipped on some ice on my front steps and bruised my hip. It wasn't serious, but apparently, it was serious enough for my children to decide my fate without consulting me. "I called you right away when that happened," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not helpless, Michael. Look, Mom, we've already found a place, Sunset Manor. It's really nice, and they have activities and other people your age. You'll make friends." Friends, as if I was a 5-year-old starting kindergarten. "And what about my house?" "This is my home, Michael. Your father and I bought this house 42 years ago. All my memories are here." There was a pause, and I could hear him discussing something with someone in the background. Probably his wife Linda, who'd never really liked me much anyway. "We'll take care of the house, Mom. Don't worry about that." The way he said it made my stomach turn. They'd already made all the decisions. This wasn't a discussion. It was a notification. "When?" I asked quietly. "We'll pick you up this Saturday. Pack whatever you need. The room comes furnished." Pack whatever I need. 60 years of marriage, of raising children, of building a life, and I was supposed to pack whatever I needed into a few suitcases. That phone call was on Tuesday. By Thursday, I still hadn't heard from Sarah or Jennifer. Not a call, not a visit, nothing. I started to wonder if they even knew about this plan, or if Michael had just made the decision for all of them. But when I called Sarah, her response told me everything I needed to know. "Oh, Mom, yes, we've been talking about this for months. We're all worried about you. This is really for the best." Months. They'd been planning this for months, and never once thought to include me in the conversation. Friday night, I sat in my living room looking around at everything I'd accumulated over 8 decades of life. The wedding photos on the mantel, the china cabinet that had been my mother's, the rocking chair where I'd nursed all 3 of my babies. How do you choose what matters most when everything matters? Saturday came too quickly. Michael arrived with a moving truck, and 2 men I'd never seen before. "Mom, these guys are going to help pack up some of your things and put them in storage. Just take what you need for now." What I needed, there was that phrase again. I watched strangers handle my possessions, boxing up my life like I was already dead. When one of them picked up a photo of my wedding day, I had to leave the room. Sarah and Jennifer showed up just as we were leaving. Sarah gave me a quick hug and said, "You're going to love it there, Mom. They have bingo on Tuesdays. Bingo on Tuesdays." As if that would replace the life I was being forced to abandon. The ride to Sunset Manor was quiet. Michael tried to make small talk about the weather, about how nice the facility was, about how this was really the best thing for everyone. But I wasn't listening. I was watching my neighborhood disappear in the rearview mirror, wondering if I'd ever see it again. Sunset Manor was exactly what you'd expect. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and that distinctive smell of industrial disinfectant trying to mask something less pleasant. The staff was friendly enough, but they had that practiced cheerfulness that healthcare Workers develop when they're dealing with people they see as burdens rather than individuals. Bafa Myram was small but clean. It had a hospital bed, a dresser, a small television, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot. This was my world now. Not Michael helped me unpack my few belongings, and then he was eager to leave. "I'll call you soon, Mom. And we'll visit regularly." That was 6 months ago. Want to know how many times my children have visited me since then? 3 times. 3 times in 6 months. Michael came once in April, stayed for 20 minutes, and spent most of that time on his phone. Sarah visited in May with her youngest daughter, but they only stayed long enough for the granddaughter to give me a card she'd made in school. Jennifer came in June, but she seemed more interested in taking photos of me to post on social media than actually talking to me. The phone calls weren't much better. Maybe once a week at first, then once every 2 weeks, then once a month. And when they did call, it was always rushed, always distracted, always ending with, "I have to go, Mom, but I'll call you soon." But here's where the story gets interesting. You see, while my children were busy forgetting about me, I was getting very acquainted with the other residents of Sunset Manor. And let me tell you, some of these people have fascinating stories. There's Mrs. Henderson, who used to be a legal secretary for 40 years. She knows more about wills and estate planning than most lawyers. There's Mr. Rodriguez, who spent 30 years as a private investigator before retiring. And there's Mrs. Chen, who worked in banking and knows everything about financial fraud. We started having coffee together every morning, and eventually, we started sharing our stories. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd been abandoned by ungrateful children. Mrs. Henderson's son put her in here, and then sold her house without telling her. Mr. Rodriguez's daughter moved across the country, and acts like he doesn't exist. Mrs. Chen's children are fighting over her money while she's still alive. One morning, about 3 months after I'd arrived, Mrs. Henderson asked me a question that changed everything. "Dorothy, honey, do you have a will?" I told her I did, that my husband and I had made simple wills years ago, leaving everything to our children in equal shares. "And have you updated it since you've been here?" I hadn't. It had never occurred to me. "Well," she said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully, "maybe it's time you did." That afternoon, I called my old family lawyer, Mr. Peterson. He was retired, but he referred me to his former partner, a sharp young woman named Rebecca Martinez. When I explained my situation, she was very understanding. "Mrs. Williams, I hear this story more often than you might think. Adult children who put their parents in care facilities and then essentially abandon them. It's heartbreaking." She came to visit me the following week, and we had a long conversation about my options. That's when she told me something that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Williams, I have to ask, do you know what's happened to your house?" I told her that Michael was supposed to be taking care of it. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but according to public records, your house was sold 3 months ago." The room started spinning. Sold? But Michael said they were taking care of it. How could they sell it without telling me? Rebecca's expression was grim. "Were you still on the deed?" "Yes, of course. It was my house." "Then someone forged your signature, or there's been some other form of fraud involved." "Mrs. Williams, this is a serious matter." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Michael's words, "We'll take care of the house, Mom." I realized now what he'd meant. They weren't taking care of it for me. They were taking care of it for themselves. The next morning, I called Michael. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Michael, I was wondering about the house. How are things going with the upkeep?" There was a long pause. "Oh, well, Mom, we've been meaning to talk to you about that. The maintenance was getting really expensive, and with the property taxes and everything, we thought it would be better to sell it and put the money aside for your care. You sold my house without telling me. Mom, you don't need to worry about these things anymore. We're handling everything. Where's the money from the sale, Michael?" Another pause. It's being invested. For your future care needs." I hung up the phone. I didn't trust myself to say another word. Rebecca came back the next week with some documents and some very interesting information. She'd done some digging, and what she found was worse than I'd imagined. "Mrs. Williams, your house sold for $485,000, but according to the paperwork I was able to obtain, the proceeds were split 3 ways between your children. There's no investment account, no trust fund, nothing set aside for your care. They'd stolen my house, my home, the place where I'd raised them. where I'd cared for their father until the day he died, where I'd planned to live out my remaining years. They'd stolen it and divided the money among themselves. What can we do? I asked. Well, we can certainly pursue criminal charges for fraud. But Mrs. Williams, I have a better idea. Are you interested in making some changes to your will? Oh, I was interested. I was very interested. You see, what my children didn't know was that the house wasn't my only asset. When my husband died, his life insurance policy was substantial. I'd used some of it to help my children with their homes, but there was still $300,000 left, sitting in a savings account, earning interest over the years. With the interest and some careful investing, with the help of my late husband's financial advisor, that money had grown to nearly $450,000. There was also my husband's pension, which had been paying me $2,800 a month since his death. I'd been living modestly, so most of that money had just been accumulating in my checking account. Add to that the savings we'd built up over 40 years of marriage, and I was sitting on nearly $600,000 that my children knew nothing about. My husband had been a private man when it came to finances. He'd handled all the investments, the retirement planning, the insurance policies. The children knew he'd left me comfortable, but they had no idea just how comfortable. Rebecca helped me understand my options. I could leave everything to charity. I could leave it to my grandchildren in trust accounts that their parents couldn't touch. Or I could get creative. I chose creative. Working with Rebecca and my new friends at Sunset Manor, I developed what we called the plan. It was simple, elegant, and perfectly legal. First, I changed my will. Instead of leaving everything to my 3 children, I left them each exactly $1. The rest of my estate would be divided among several beneficiaries. $100,000 to Sunset Manor to improve the living conditions for residents. $100,000 to a local charity that provides legal aid to elderly people who've been financially abused by their families. $50,000 each to Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Rodriguez, and Mrs. Chen, the friends who'd shown me more kindness in 6 months than my children had in years. The remaining money would go to my grandchildren, but in trust accounts that they couldn't access until they turned 30, and only if they maintained a relationship with me. But that was just the beginning. You see, Mr. Rodriguez might be retired, but he still has contacts in the private investigation business. For a small fee, he arranged to have my children's financial activities monitored. What we discovered was fascinating. Michael had used his share of the house money to buy a new BMW and take his family on a European vacation. Sarah had renovated her kitchen and bought a boat. Jennifer had paid off her credit cards and invested in her husband's failing restaurant. They'd divided up the profits from selling my home like it was lottery money, never once considering that they'd stolen it from their own mother. But here's the beautiful part of the plan. Rebecca helped me set up a small trust fund that would pay for my care at Sunset Manor for the rest of my life. The fund was structured so that if any of my children tried to move me to a cheaper facility or cut back on my care to save money, the trust would immediately distribute all remaining funds to charity, leaving them with nothing. 6 months after I'd changed my will, I decided it was time to let my children know about their new inheritance. I called each of them and asked them to come visit me. I told them I had something important to discuss about my estate planning. For the first time in months, all 3 of them showed up promptly. We sat in the common room at Sunset Manor, and I looked at these 3 adults who'd once been the center of my universe. Michael, 58 years old, checking his phone every few minutes. Sarah, 55, looking impatient and glancing at her watch. Jennifer, 52, scrolling through social media while I tried to talk. I asked you all here because I wanted to discuss my will, I began. Suddenly, I had their full attention. Michael put his phone away. Sarah stopped checking her watch. Jennifer actually looked at me. I know you're all concerned about my finances and my future care, I continued, so I thought it was important to let you know that I've made some changes to my estate planning. What kind of changes, Mom? Michael asked, and I could hear the concern in his voice. Not concern for me, but concern for his inheritance. Well, I've been thinking a lot about what's really important to me, especially since I've been living here. I've made some new friends, and I've gotten involved with some charities that do important work. I paused and looked at each of them. They were hanging on my every word now. I've decided to leave the bulk of my estate to organizations and people who have shown me kindness and respect during this difficult time in my life. Sarah spoke up first. Mom, that's That's wonderful that you want to help charities, but don't you think you should make sure your family is taken care of first? Family. The irony was almost too much to bear. Oh, don't worry, I said. I haven't forgotten about my family. In fact, I've left each of you exactly what you deserve. What do you mean? Jennifer asked. I reached into my purse and pulled out 3 envelopes. These are copies of the relevant portions of my new will. You each get $1. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael was the first to speak. $1. Mom, this has to be a joke. It's no joke. Michael, $1 each. That's what I've decided you deserve. Sarah's face was turning red. Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your children. We deserve to inherit your estate. I stood up, and for the first time in months, I felt strong. Let me tell you what you deserve. You deserve exactly what you've given me since you put me in this place. You sold my house without telling me and kept the money for yourselves. You visit me maybe once every 2 months. You call me when it's convenient for you. You treated me like a burden you needed to dispose of. Mom, that's not fair, Jennifer protested. We did what we thought was best for you. Best for me, or best for you? Tell me, Jennifer, how did you decide that selling my house and keeping the money was best for me? She couldn't answer. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to leave here with your copies of my will, and you're going to think about the choices you've made. If you want to contest the will, you're welcome to try, but I've been very thorough in documenting the reasons for my decisions. Rebecca Martinez is an excellent lawyer, and she's prepared for any challenges you might bring. Michael stood up, his face flushed with anger. Mom, you can't do this. We have families to think about. We have mortgages, college tuitions to pay, and I had a mother to think about, I replied. But that didn't stop you from treating me like I was already dead. They left that day angrier than I'd ever seen them. But I felt lighter than I had in years. The next few weeks were interesting. Michael called several times, alternating between anger and attempts at manipulation. He'd yell at me about being ungrateful, then call back an hour later to apologize and talk about how much he loved me. Sarah tried a different approach, bringing my grandchildren to visit and making pointed comments about how sad it would be if Grandma didn't leave anything for their college funds. Jennifer mostly sent text messages about how hurt and disappointed she was. But here's the thing, none of them actually changed their behavior. They were still the same selfish, manipulative people they'd always been. They just wanted me to change my will back so they could go back to ignoring me with clear consciences. That's when I decided to implement the final phase of the plan. I called Rebecca and asked her to arrange a meeting with all 3 of my children and their spouses. I told them I was reconsidering my decision and wanted to discuss the possibility of changing my will back. They all showed up within the hour. I've been thinking about what you all said, I began, and I realized that maybe I was too hasty in my decision. Family is important, and I don't want to leave this world with bad feelings between us. I could see the relief on their faces. They thought I want to spend Saturday with each of your families. Michael, you can take Saturday morning. Sarah, Saturday afternoon. Jennifer, Saturday evening. We'll have dinner together. Spend time with the grandchildren. Just enjoy being a family again. The excuses started immediately. Michael had a golf tournament. Sarah had already made plans to visit her in-laws. Jennifer had to work. Well, I said, I guess we'll have to wait until the following weekend then. More excuses. Work commitments, social obligations, prior plans. You know what? I said, standing up again. I think I was right the first time. $1 each. Wait, Michael said desperately. We can rearrange things. It's just that this weekend is particularly busy. It's always going to be particularly busy. Michael, that's the problem. You have time for everything except me. I looked at each of them one more time. I'm 83 years old. I probably don't have many years left. You've made it very clear that you don't want to spend those years with me unless there's money involved. So I've decided to spend my money on people who actually want to spend time with me. That was 3 months ago. Want to know how many times they've visited since then? 0. How many phone calls? 2. Both from Michael Boft, trying to convince me to reconsider my decision. But here's the amazing thing that's happened since then. Remember Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Rodriguez, and Mrs. Chen. We've become like a real family. We have dinner together every night. We play cards, we watch movies, we share stories about our lives. Mrs. Henderson is teaching me to knit. Mr. Rodriguez is helping me write my memoirs. Mrs. Chen and I are learning to play mahjong. And the staff here at Sunset Manor has started treating me differently too. When word got around that I was planning to leave a substantial donation to the facility, suddenly my requests for better food, more activities, and improved living conditions started being taken seriously. But the best part, my grandchildren have started calling me. It turns out that when I set up their trust funds, Rebecca included a provision that they would be notified of their inheritance when they turned 18. My oldest granddaughter, Michael's daughter Emma, called me last week. "Grandma," she said, "I don't understand what's happening with Dad and the will, but I want you to know that I love you, and I want to have a relationship with you that has nothing to do with money." She's been visiting me every weekend since then, and she's bringing her younger siblings with her. They're wonderful kids, and it breaks my heart that their parents have been using them as pawns in this game. Yesterday, I got a call from a lawyer representing my children. They're planning to contest the will, claiming that I'm not mentally competent to make financial decisions. It's exactly what Rebecca predicted would happen. But here's what they don't know. I've been seeing a geriatric psychiatrist every month since I changed my will. Dr. Patterson has been documenting my mental state, my decision-making capacity, and my reasons for disinheriting my children. I have a paper trail that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. I've also been recording our conversations. You see, Mr. Rodriguez taught me how to use a small digital recorder, and I've been documenting every interaction I've had with my children since I told them about the will change. Their attempts at manipulation, their threats, their complete lack of genuine concern for my well-being. It's all recorded, so let them contest the will. Let them drag this through the courts. Let them spend thousands of dollars on lawyers trying to prove that their 83-year-old mother is incompetent. Every dollar they spend on legal fees is one less dollar they'll have when they inevitably lose. But you know what the real victory is? It's not the money. It's not even the satisfaction of watching them scramble to undo the consequences of their own actions. The real victory is that I've learned something important about myself. I spent 60 years of my life trying to earn my children's love and respect through sacrifice and generosity. I gave them everything I had, and they took it for granted. Now, at 83 years old, I've finally learned that love and respect can't be bought. They have to be earned. And if someone isn't willing to earn your love, they don't deserve it. I've also learned that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes your real family is the people who choose to be there for you when you need them most. Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Chen, the staff here who've started treating me like a person instead of a problem. My granddaughter Emma who calls me just to talk. These are my family now. My children taught me a valuable lesson, though I don't think it's the one they intended to teach. They taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. They taught me that I deserve better than being forgotten and abandoned. They taught me that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. So here I am, sitting in my room at Sunset Manor, looking out at that parking lot, and I'm happier than I've been in years. I have real friends. I have meaningful relationships, and I have the satisfaction of knowing that I took control of my own life when it mattered most. My children thought they could put me somewhere out of the way and forget about me while they waited for me to die and leave them my money. They thought I was too old, too weak, too dependent to fight back. They were wrong, and in a few years, when they're sitting in a lawyer's office listening to the reading of my will, they're going to understand just how wrong they were. They're going to realize that the mother they dismissed and abandoned was sharper than they gave her credit for. I want to leave you with this thought. If you're watching this and you have aging parents, don't assume they're helpless just because they need a little extra care. Don't make decisions about their lives without including them in the conversation. Don't treat them like burdens or inconveniences. And if you're older and you're dealing with family members who've forgotten your worth, remember that it's never too late to remind them. You have more power than you think you do. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's about taking back control of your own life and showing them exactly what they've lost. My name is Dorothy Williams. I'm 83 years old, and I'm nobody's burden. And if you've got a story like mine, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Sometimes, the best thing about getting older is finally having the courage to stop putting up with nonsense from people who should know better. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. Trust me, I've got plenty more where this came from.